We get a lot of thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to sanction him? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move ahead with that?
I'm looking at it, yeah. No, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very, very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Can you sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They passed it totally at my option and to terminate totally at my option. And I'm looking at it very strongly.
CNN's Kevin Liptak is joining us now to talk more about this. What's interesting, Kevin, is that yesterday the president announced these plans to send new defensive weapons to Ukraine. And in that same cabinet meeting that Kristen was just talking about, he talked about his displeasure with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Again, kind of moving away from where his base is on a lot of this stuff.
And moving away from where he has been really for the last 10 years. When you think about Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin, it is one of the most fascinating relationships in the world. And for so long, Trump has taken this conciliatory approach to the Russian leader. That is changing very, very quickly. And you can hear President Trump growing more and more upset with Putin as he rejects his overtures to try and bring the war in Ukraine to an end, but also as he ramps up his attacks on Ukraine. He's also massing troops in the north of that country, really sort of putting back into Trump's face his efforts to bring about peace. Today, I think, were his strongest comments ever about Putin. Listen to what he said.
We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. We get a lot of thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to sanction him? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move ahead
I'm
with
looking
that?
at it, yeah. No, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very, very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
And you'd sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They passed it totally at my option.
So you hear him there stopping short of saying that he would approve of these new sanctions on Russia, which I do think leaves open the question is where he will channel this anger towards Putin. He's not saying that he's going to put sanctions on. What he is saying is that he will send new defensive weapons to Ukraine, which is significant because remember, just last week, the administration said that it would put a pause on those weapons as it did this assessment of U.S. stockpiles. President Trump, after talking to Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader last week, seemed open to helping Ukraine with its air defenses. Now he's saying he's approved of these new weapons. And actually, when our colleague, Caitlin Collins, asked him in that cabinet meeting, who actually approved of this pause, he said he didn't know.
That's really interesting. And it also, too, because we've out of the Pentagon and the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, they've also been on the other side of this, in addition to Trump's evolving, take on this.
Yeah, I mean, and Trump actually made an interesting point in there. Whether you think that the U.S. has supplied too much to the Ukrainians, whether you think the U.S. has spent too much money on the war there, which is his position. That was the position he took on the campaign trail. That's the position that a lot of the people around him in the cabinet took. He said, whether you believe that or not, you have to think that the Ukrainians are brave. They have held out this long in this conflict. They've been willing to operate these weapon systems that are dangerous to operate. And he seems to be adopting the viewpoint that the U.S. does need to actually support Ukraine in this conflict. They've held out this long. They have pushed back Russia in some ways, in ways that many people did not expect at the start of this war. Clearly, I think his relationship with Zelensky is developing. And actually, he said in that call last week that it was good. And Zelensky actually said it was their best conversation that they had had to date. I think it's very evident that the president is sort of evolving in his view of this war. He wants to do what he can to help Ukraine defend itself.
We've come a long way from that Oval Office meeting. Kevin Liptak, thank you so much.
Eli Stokols, you cover the White House on a daily basis. We have, in, the past month or two, heard much tougher language from the president when it comes to Vladimir Putin than we did in the almost 10 years that he has been on the political scene.
Right, that soundbite that you just played was like, 10 years in the making.
Right.
It's taken him 10 years to come to that point of view that a lot of a lot of his predecessors and a lot of people in both parties, Republicans and Democrats, have had that view of Putin for a long time. What's changed, I am told, is that the president's simply frustrated that Russia has shown no interest in his efforts to attempt to bring about negotiations to end the war. After Ukraine accepted a 30-day ceasefire, Vladimir Putin has increased the bombardment of Ukraine fivefold. And so Trump is frustrated about that. He's, I'm told he's been cooler to Putin in their phone conversations. They had a long conversation last week, did not go very well. You heard the president afterwards saying he was frustrated. And so we are hearing the president's frustration rhetorically. We're not seeing that translate yet into any kind of response. He said there may be a surprise for Russia. He talked about the sanctions bill at the end of that clip, saying, I have the option of looking at the sanctions bill if and when the Senate takes it up and passes it. But at this point, he's just talking tougher to Vladimir Putin.
Except, I would argue that the action is what he is doing vis-a-vis Ukraine, meaning that he is not listening to those in the MAGA wing of his party who don't want to have anything to do with Ukraine, maybe even including the vice president, but who knows where he is now that he's actually on the inside getting briefings about what's going on in Ukraine. But the fact that the president is now sort of allowing weapons once again to go from the U.S. to Ukraine perhaps is a way to send a message to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, and Eli put it well, and this is a campaign promise that Trump made and later said was sarcastic, but did make many times. I met voters who voted for Trump on the premise that he could bring wars to an end when Joe Biden couldn't. He had said that he could end this war immediately. He has those voices on the right saying just withdraw. There is every dollar spent in Ukraine could be spent here. And he has there is that hangover, that memory of Joe Biden ending our commitment to Afghanistan and being humiliated, another thing Trump ran on. So I've never figured out what the end game is when it became impossible to just end the war on day one like he promised.
Yeah, and also in this press conference, the president said he planned to press U.S. defense contractors to step up production of equipment to help Ukraine defend itself.
Yeah, actually, the White House framing on this has been very interesting as well. Not only what the president says, but they had said that the decision on the weapons was to, quote, put America's first. So America's interests first. So now the defense of Ukraine is tied to America's interests, which is the way that the previous administration had explained their decision, but is a remarkable shift for the Trump administration, which has up until this point said or acted the opposite. Not that long ago, it was Ukrainian President Zelensky who was sitting at the White House alongside the president and was getting hammered by the vice president and the president over what was happening. And now to see the president essentially throw his hands up in the air and say that Vladimir Putin isn't coming around, really remarkable that is being shown in the actions that they have taken.